Chapter 16. Rosemary Comes to School. In the little brown house over the hedge, Kay was waking too, but even before his eyes were open he remembered that something unpleasant was waiting for him in this day. What was it? Oh yes, the mask business. The policeman had told the artist that he, Kay, was the masker. Before night, everyone in the village would think he was the masker. Everyone, that is, except Gentian and Nan and Dietra. They would not believe the policeman, but they would be bothered all the same. But why was Gentian laughing? Had she forgotten all about last night and the policeman? Kay jumped out of bed and ran to the head of the stairs. The laughter was coming up from the sitting room, and Gentian only laughed like that when she was very, very happy. "What is it? Why are you laughing?" Kay called down to her. At his voice, she came dancing out in the hall. She was still in her nightgown, and her hair was all rumpled from her pillow. Her cheeks were rosy from sleep. "Oh, Kay," she cried, "do come and see the Wind Boy. He is perfect." "Is the Wind Boy down there?" "Hello, Wind Boy," Kay sang out. "Oh no, not our Wind Boy, the statuette." I could hardly wait for morning to see if Mother had followed him to the clear land and got him happy. I was awake before dawn, but Kay was bounding down the stairs. He had forgotten about the statuette. Of course, well, some good thing had come out of last night. Dietra was just finishing her early breakfast, and right in the middle of the table in front of the tulips, the early sun just touching his head, stood the finished Wind Boy. Kay went close and stood looking. Yes, Gentian was right. He was perfect. It was the Wind Boy as he had looked when he caught the mask that Nan had thrown, and scattered it to bits on the lawn. His face and body too were all alight and joyous. He was about to fly up and away into the blue air. He was standing on very tiptoes, his wings spread wide, his whole body, every bit of him, ready. Indeed, the statuette, little as it was, and made only of plastilina, was so alive and lightened from within it was not easy for the children to remember that it was just a statuette, and not the Wind Boy himself. "Oh, Mother, he is just himself, as he became last night. Nan was right. You did follow him up there then." Dietra was smiling happily but sleepily. She had not been to bed at all, but had worked all night in the clear land. "Yes," she said, "last night was different. I saw him right. He had never been like that before. There was always a cloud over him somehow. But last night he shone out to my eyes, clear and radiant, like this. Oh, I have never done work of this sort before, I know that." Kay and Gentian were looking at each other now. Their eyes said, "She thinks she did it." But it was really us, ourselves and Nan. We made the Wind Boy happy. And Kay exclaimed aloud, "I don't care now. They can do what they want to me. It was worth it." Dietra looked away from the statuette and at Kay, puzzled. "What don't you care about, Kay? What is worth it, and worth what?" But with her words the village clock began to strike. It was 7 o'clock. "Oh, I must hurry," Dietra cried, jumping up, "or I shall miss my train." She suddenly kissed and hugged both her children, snatched up her cape, and ran away out of the house. But Kay had meant what he said. The statuette was so lovely, and his mother was made so happy by it, that he was now ready to face the day, and all the humiliation it might hold for him. When school time came, he was ready for it. What did school matter, since all the really important things had got themselves so very right at last? But the minute he got into the schoolyard, he knew that the policeman had already spread the news of having caught him with the mask. The children playing around the door pretended great fear and ran away shrieking. There was nothing Kay could do but march in and take his accustomed seat, and there wait for what would come next. Miss Todd, he thought, kept her gaze on him steadily and strangely from the very first. There was an unusual hubbub in the room, but it stopped when he entered. Then school began. Kay's cheeks were afire, but his head was very, very high. He was thinking, I'm glad Mother won't know till tonight anyway. She'll have all day to think about the Wind Boy and be happy. But he was sorry for Gentian, who was sitting very erect behind her little desk, with her hands tightly clasped in her lap and her lips set together. At first, school went as usual. Miss Todd's good order and drill were not to be shaken by the excitement that lay under the morning. But whenever Kay looked up from his books or paper, he seemed to find her keen eyes upon him, and she did not call on him to recite, although his turn came over and over. She passed him by, but still looking at him. Never had school seemed so long to Kay and Gentian, though truly it had often seemed long enough. Well, if Kay was to be expelled and put to shame, why didn't Miss Todd do it now? That would be better than this. Behind the ticking of the school clock and the lessons and the recitations, the whole school was simply waiting for some sort of excitement. Everyone knew that, and then toward recess time at last it came. A step out in the hall, a boy near Kay whispered, "The policeman." So that was it. They had been waiting for the policeman to come to take him away to prison. In his own country they did not put little boys into prison, but who knew what they might or might not do here in this strange foreign land? Well, let them. Now less than ever did he mean to tell on Rose-Marie. A knock sounded on the door. Everyone jumped a little, even Miss Todd, just as though, after the steps, they had not been expecting a knock. Kay straightened back his shoulders and tried not to look at Gentian, but somehow he could not help seeing her wide blue Gentian eyes swam before his gaze, eyes terrified for him. Then Miss Todd opened the door, and there came in, not the policeman, but the artist, and with Rose-Marie. The school gasped in its surprise. You could hear it all about the room, but the artist did not take the chair Miss Todd so politely offered him. He came and stood by her desk and looked at the children. He looked at them all in turn, and they looked back. It made Gentian think of the shoeman who had measured her and Kay by looking into their eyes. What was the great artist measuring them for? When he came to Gentian, he smiled a greeting, but she could not smile back. She was too frightened for Kay. But the artist seemed to understand her soberness. He spoke rather quickly then, in a low, clear voice. "I have come to tell you that the masker has been found," he said, "and that it will not frighten you again at twilight. You can play on the streets near my house now without thought of it. It will never come again." Miss Todd at her desk nodded, and now there was no doubt about it any longer. She was looking at Kay in great sternness, but the artist was not stern. He said, "And the policeman assures me that he knows who the masker was. It was, he says, a boy in this school. Indeed, he caught him with the mask in his hands. His name is Kay. Is Kay here now? Kay, stand up." Miss Todd's voice, to Kay's surprise, had sorriness mixed with its sternness. Kay stood up by his seat. The artist looked at him kindly, but Kay was too miserable to see that. "I hear that for many days, always at twilight, Kay, you have gone around in a horrid mask, frightening other children. The policeman caught you with the mask, so he thinks it must have been you all this time. Was it?" "He did catch me with the mask, but I never wore it, or frightened anyone with it." "Then who did?" Kay did not answer that. He stayed silent, trying hard not to look at Rose-Marie. "Won't you tell?" "No, sir, I won't." All the other children, and even Miss Todd, gasped at Kay's coolness. It must have been because Kay was a foreigner and did not know how great a man the artist was, and how important to this village that he dared speak so firmly his no. Why, the artist had given them this very school and its big playground. No other village of its size in the country had such a fine school and playground. But the artist did not mind Kay's seeming fearlessness. He said, "Well, Kay, if you won't tell, Rose-Marie will. Rose-Marie is here just for that." He turned and looked down at his little granddaughter. Rose-Marie had stood all this while looking at no one in the school but Kay. She was a little shy at being up there before all the eyes of the village children. But aside from that shyness, she was her natural self, her merry self, with Dimple just around the corner. Dimples. Now that her grandfather had turned to her, she had to speak. She did it quickly, rather breathlessly, and still looking at Kay. "I was the masker. It was I who frightened you all. My governess has her supper at twilight, and then I could get out without her knowing. Last night Kay chased me and caught me, and I gave him the mask. He was taking it back to the wind boy to tear up. When the policeman caught him, he never wore it at all." Never was a schoolroom more silent than that school was for a minute after Rose-Marie had finished, till the artist spoke again. "Rose-Marie didn't know about the little boy who was made sick. You see, we did not want her to be frightened, and so no one mentioned the masker to her ever, or what harm it was doing. Rose-Marie had no children to play with, and so she found that running around in the twilight, frightening people, and looking in at windows where there were children was the next best thing to having playmates. That is why it would not be fair to punish her for her masquerading any more than she has already been punished, and now I want her to have children to play with forever after, so that she will not have to look into windows. And so I am here to ask Miss Todd if she may come to this school, and indeed begin working with you and playing with you this very morning." And then the artist added one thing more. "I hope you will all be friends with Rose-Marie, for she needs your friendship. But you know from what has happened that she has one true and loyal friend here already, and that is Kay." Then, after a few quiet words at the door with Miss Todd, the artist went away, leaving Rose-Marie at school. Just at first, the children could hardly attend to their lessons. Before this, they had only glimpsed Rose-Marie in the distance. She seemed like a child in a moving picture more than in real life. And now here she was, one of them, in a plain gingham frock and with everyday leather sandals and brown socks. Why, she looked just like any other of the little girls. But almost at once Rose-Marie's merry brown eyes and the toss of her dark dancing curls did away with their feelings of shyness. Even before recess came and they ran out to play, they had discovered that she was a real little girl. But recess did add the finishing touch. Rose-Marie was such fun. You would think she had been playing with other children all her life. Perhaps that was because she had so often imagined what she would do, had she children to play with. Of course, Rose-Marie never, as the other children had done in the past, left Gentian and Kay out. Rather, they were the first she turned to in everything. Had she not been watching them from her high nursery window for months now? Did she not know them well? Better even than their schoolmates knew them. So, for the first time since they had come to the village, Kay and Gentian forgot that they were foreigners and left off all strangeness. They raced and shouted and laughed with the rest, and at the close of school Rose-Marie ran home between them, the happiest little girl in the village. But she pulled them to a stop at a corner. "How can you run so fast?" she asked. "My breath's gone." "It's the sandals, I think," Kay answered. And then all the rest of the way home they walked very slowly, for Kay and Gentian had to tell Rosemarie about the shoeman and his blue curtained store with the crystal light flooding down the stairs, and the little oven bird in place of a doorbell. Rosemarie believed it all and loved it. Gentian and Kay were very late in getting home from school that day. When Nan saw their faces, she asked, "What happened to you? Was school so wonderful?" "Oh, it was," they cried, and then between them they told her all about the morning. Nan was as happy as they over all that had happened. "And from now on school will never seem unpleasant to you again," she said when they were done. "You will go there gladly every morning just as the other children do. It is your school now, and the village will get to be your village. That is just as your mother wants it. How glad she will be." But they were hardly done with their dinner because they had talked so much before Rosemarie came skipping through the hole in the hedge, just as though she had been doing it always, and was at their window. Her dancing curls and merry eyes might have belonged to some fairy, but her cheeks were too hard and rosy for any but a very human little girl. Come in," cried the children. "No, come out," called back Rosemarie. "Let's play in the tulip garden. Grandfather says we may without Miss Prynes coming along to bother. Think of that. But Mother doesn't let us go there," the children said wistfully. Nan had heard from the kitchen and came quickly into the sitting room. "Your mother would not mind your going through the hedge now," she assured them, "since it's Rosemarie herself that asked you. It was only because she thought you were not wanted there that she forbade it before." Rosemarie had run around and in at the door, and was in the room with them. To Gentian's and Kay's surprise, she threw her arms about Nan's neck and gave her a great hug. "Do you know Nan?" they asked. "Of course I do. Didn't she come in starry brightness to tell me everything and make me brave? Grandfather thinks she was only a dream, but he won't think so when we show her to him, and see what she made happen. I'm your playmate now. I'm even going to your school. A funny dream to manage all that." Then Nan and Gentian and Kay and Rosemarie all laughed together, though Kay and Gentian did not yet know exactly what it was about. And just as Gentian, Monday morning up in the clear school, had danced round and round in the arbor and then out of it, so here now these four took hands and danced round and round in the room and out the door, and there round and round under the cherry tree to the music of their laughter. It was Nan who stopped first. "I am forgetting all about the dishes," she said. At that they laughed more. "What a thing to remember," Rosemarie cried. But Kay said, "Nan is like that. If there weren't dishes or something to be done, I think she'd fly straight away and be a fairy." "May we help you with the dishes then?" asked Rosemarie. "I never was let help with any housework, no matter how much I teased too." So the children went in with Nan and helped clear the table. Nan gave them a clean towel, each a towel with the sunshine still in it, for they had come from the line at the door where Nan had hung them that morning, and after she had dipped the glasses and plates, knives and forks into rainbow soap suds and washed them well, the children took them to dry. Then Rosemarie, because she was so eager to be in on everything, was allowed to sweep up the crumbs under the table, while Kay held the dustpan for her, and to hang the newly washed towels out in the sunshine at the back door again. "Now for the tulip garden," Kay cried, who had grown a little impatient of all this housework. "Goodbye then, come home in time for supper," Nan said. "Oh, but you come too, Nan," Rosemarie pleaded. It will be so much more fun with you along. But I thought you didn't want a grown-up. Miss Prine's not going." Rosemary laughed. "Well, you're not Miss Prine," she said. "Why, you're like us, only more so." So Nan put off the mending she had intended to do until evening, and ran away with the children, through the hole in the hedge and down the grassy paths toward the tulip garden. Chapter 17. Dietra Meets the Artist. When they got there, it was Nan who thought up the most wonderful things to play. They were games the children had never heard of before, and they were the greatest fun. Afterwards they could never play them over again, for somehow they could not remember how they had gone. That was strange, for at the time they had not seemed complicated, but simple as day. They found themselves in these games, jumping farther than they had known they could jump, climbing higher and hiding in more secret and smaller places than they would have dreamed themselves able to before. But after a while they grew tired of even these wonderful games, and threw themselves down in the grassy center of the tulip garden to rest. "Now," said Rosemary, "tell me about the Wind Boy." "But we have told you all," Kay answered. "There is nothing more." "Well, if he's real, and not just a pretend game of yours," Rosemary asked, teasingly, "why doesn't he come and play with us now?" "Why, I don't know. Perhaps he will. Perhaps he's been around all this time wanting to play with us." But Gentian shook her head. "No, Kay, he's nowhere about. I've been watching for him all afternoon. I would have seen him if he was anywhere around. Now that he has his clear children's playmates back, perhaps he won't want to come down here any more. Perhaps he only came before because he was lonely," Kay said. Gentian did not answer that. She herself had been thinking exactly that thing for hours, with this difference that she had not the heart to speak it. "Let's try to set up into the clear land, to see up into the clear land," Rosemary suggested then. "Why can't we see that other tulip garden that you say is just up there over this one?" "We can try," Kay answered, "but it takes a special kind of looking to see it, doesn't it, Nan?" "How shall we look then?" "I don't know exactly, but Gentian went there through the walls of Nan's attic room, you told me." "How did you do that, Gentian?" "By getting deep still." "What is that?" Gentian could not explain. Now Nan, who had been lying on her back, nibbling a sweet grass blade, said, "There are many, many ways of looking to see into the clear land. Let's lie quietly on our backs here for a little and just try." So the four playmates lay on their backs in the cool grass and tried to see up into the clear land. But for all their looking and all their expectant stillness, it did not take shape for them in the blue spring air. Rosemary was the first to grow impatient. She sat up. "Oh, there is nothing but blue sky up there," she cried, "and white clouds. I think it must have been all your imagining, Kay and Gentian." "No, no," Kay protested. "It was not imagining. You ought to see the statuette Mother has made of the Wind Boy. Then you'd know he was as real as you are." "Oh, has your mother seen him too?" "Yes, of course, but the funny thing about that is that she does not remember she has." "I should think that was a funny thing. Too funny to be true. I don't." "Oh, but it is just as Kay tells you," Nan interrupted. She was still stretched on her back, looking up into the blue spring air. "The truest and most important things are almost always those we have no words for." That is what Kay means by not remembering. His mother doesn't tell it over to herself in words when she gets back from the clear land, but she tells it in other ways, like the Wind Boy statue, and it's in her eyes. Wait till you see her, Rosemarie." Although Nan said this, and it explained nothing to Rosemarie, still she at once believed her and laughed no more. "Let's go and see the statuette," Gentian suggested then. "You'll love it, Rosemarie, just as we do." "All right, only not for a little while. It's so cool and comfortable here in the grass, and I'm finding such funny pictures in the clouds. Wait a little." "I will go and bring the statuette here instead," Nan said, getting up suddenly. "It will be all the more beautiful out here with the sun on it." Now, neither Kay nor Gentian would have thought of touching their mother's work, but it never entered their heads that Nan was doing anything wrong, and they were right to believe in her so. She ran away to fetch the statuette. Rosemarie, who was sitting up, watched her go. Running, she looks just like a relief of a dancing girl on an old Greek vase in Grandfather's study, she said. "She moves as though she were hearing music." "Yes, she walks like that too. I've often noticed," Kay agreed thoughtfully. "Sometimes I almost hear it too, the music, but never quite." After that they lay quiet, saying no more until Nan returned with the statuette, held very carefully before her. She stood it up in their midst, in the grassy place. Rosemarie knelt in front of it. "Oh, he is just as you described him, Kay," she cried. "And he is shining too. You didn't describe that." "I have been wondering about that shining," Kay said, "when he's just made out of gray plastilina. Where does the shiningness come from?" "Why, that's his happiness," Nan tried to explain. "It shines out through his face, and even through his wings and body. But the statuette can't be happy, it's only a statuette." "That is true, but your mother could copy the happiness, and here it is." "I wonder," Gentian said suddenly and softly, "I wonder if that is what the clear land is, happiness. And this land down here is only the copy of that shining, even ourselves only copies." "Oh, Gentian," Nan said, "perhaps you must ask the great artist up there some time. I don't know." Rosemarie was still kneeling in front of the statuette. It was so alive-seeming. She almost expected at any minute that the breeze would stir in its curls and its wings bend. As the minutes passed, and it still remained, always ready for flight but never flying, her strange surprise grew. That will tell you how real and beautiful Dietra had made him. They were all so absorbed, Gentian in her new, searching thoughts, Rosemarie in the statuette, Kay in Rosemarie's delight, and Nan in all of them, that they did not hear the artist coming down the path toward them. For some time he stood, all unknown, above them. But after a while he spoke. "What is that?" His voice rang with wonder and delight. "Who brought this beautiful thing here?" "I did," Nan answered, no surprise in her face as she turned to him. "Is it yours?" "No, it is Dietra's. She made it last night. She did not go to bed at all." "I should think not. Who is Dietra?" "Why, she is our mother," both Kay and Gentian cried together proudly. "Why have I not known, then? May I take it up?" He asked of Nan. You may think it strange that the great artist should ask of Nan, the general housework girl, permission to touch a statuette he had found being played with by the children in his garden. But if you think so, that is because you have not seen the statuette, and you have not seen Nan. Yes, she nodded. Dietra would like you to see it. Very gently, even reverently, the artist raised the little statuette up and held it out before him in the afternoon sunlight. He turned it around and around slowly, his eyes narrow and intent, as Dietra's eyes had been narrow and intent when she worked on it. "Is she home now, the artist?" he asked finally. He spoke of Dietra as the artist. The children's eyes shone. "No, she is at the factory," Nan answered. "She works there all day, but she will come soon now." In a in a factory? The creator of this, working in a factory? Yes, they are refugees. The father who went to war has lost track of them, so Dietra cannot stay at home with her children. She must earn bread and a roof for their heads in a factory. She shall never go there again if I can help it. May I take this to her house for its safety and wait there for her?" Nan nodded. "She will be glad of your praise," she said. "But she must have more than praise," the artist thought to himself. "She must be paid for this, if she will let me have it. It shall be done into bronze, and stand here, just where I found it, beside a fountain. Here, in the tulip garden, the wind boy will stand always on tiptoe, about to fly. People will come far to see it." At that, Gentian clapped her hands. It was a soft clapping, but the artist heard and turned to look down at her. He smiled, smiling now for the first time. He said, "You were right all the time, little wind girl, when you assured me that the wind boy was real. Your mother has proved for us forever that he is real, real as ourselves." Dietra was very, very tired when she came home from the factory that evening. She had not been to bed at all the night before, you will remember. But when she turned in at her little gate, she braced her body, put back her shoulders, and made her steps light to greet her children. She came in with a high head and her eyes smiling, but she stopped, amazed, in the door, for there, rising to meet her, was the artist, his head topped with its mass of gray curls, just escaping the low ceiling of the little room. In his hands he still held carefully the wind boy. He could not let it go. "Good evening," said Dietra. "Good evening," said the artist. Dietra untied her cape at the neck and dropped it beside her onto a chair. In the cape, and in the shadow of the room, she looked like a tired working woman, but now without the dark garment, and in the light of the candles that Nan had just brought in. She was herself, the self the children always saw. Her wide, frank eyes, her high-held head, her straight, slim body made her look like a brighter and human candle. The artist bowed his head over the statuette. "This is beauty," he said. "Yes, I know," Dietra replied tranquilly. "I saw so clearly last night that I stayed up all night to work. I want to buy it of you for my tulip garden." And then Dietra and the artist sat down on the bench under the window and talked. Nan was getting supper and setting the table, but it did not interrupt the artist, for she passed back and forth as softly as a shadow outside the door under the cherry tree. Kay and Gentian and Rose-Marie had gone to play, but the sound of their laughter did not disturb the artist and Dietra. When you have created a beautiful thing, that is happiness, but the next happiness is to find someone who understands what you have done and knows that it is beautiful. Dietra had both. But at last supper was ready, and the children came in. Rose-Marie stood by her grandfather. He got up. "I shall share this with the artist of the world," he said. "Tomorrow all the papers shall have news of your genius and its promise. Then your husband, if only he is alive and searching, must come upon your name and find you." "I have been thinking of that all the time you were talking," Dietra answered. "And if he does find us now, we shall take this money you are paying for the wind boy and buy the meadows behind this house, and he will turn them into tree nurseries. At home before the war, that was what my husband did. Fruit trees, he is marvelous at it. Then we shall live on here in our adopted country, for there is nothing left in the old for us." The artist nodded. Well pleased with the plan, I shall send my wires and cables at once, he promised. Tomorrow the world will know that here in this little brown house lives a new great artist. If your husband is alive, there's a chance he'll hear of it or read it. That night the little brown house sat like a stepping stone to the artist's great one, could scarcely hold its happiness. At last the three had reason to hope that Hazar would find them. Soon the artist had been so sure. They had had no one to help them before. But Gentian awoke in the night to remember the wind boy. He had said he liked her best. He had kissed her. He had been a perfect playmate. But now he had forgotten, and was staying away in the clear land with the clear children. In spite of all her happiness, Gentian's blue eyes in the dark were touched with puzzled wonder. Chapter 18. Comrades. The artist was true to his word. While the family in the little brown cottage slept, the telegraph wires and the radio waves and even the great cables under the oceans were busy with the news. Our great living artist has discovered a genius, a new and entirely unknown sculptress. He has bought a statuette from her and paid a fabulous sum for it. She is a refugee living with her children at his very door, and has lived there for a year without his knowing about her work. Then came her full name and her story. By morning all the papers in the country had the story, and many printed it in headlines on their front pages. The people living in the artist's village could hardly believe their eyes when they read. Their surprise and excitement was immense. Why, they had seen Dietra every morning going to work in her dark cape. There had been no sign about her of this, or if there had been a sign, they had failed to see it. Their curiosity led some of them, even so early in the morning, to go out and walk down the street to take a good look at the little brown cottage that now housed so much fame. There was even pride in their gaze, for after all Dietra was one of them, one of their village, and when Kay and Gentian with Rosemarie ran by on their way to school, the villagers looked after them thoughtfully. Well, things will be different for those children after this, they said wisely, nodding their heads at one another, and it's a good thing, for better-mannered or brighter children you would go far to find. As for Dietra, she went to her work that morning as usual, for she meant to tell her employer about her good fortune, and give him a fair chance to replace her. But her feet today went lightly toward her task, and she walked like a queen, not as a proud queen, you must know, but as a happy one, for she had a strong hope that somehow, somewhere, Hazar, the children's father, would read the news, and so find them at last. And it did happen just as she hoped. In a city not far away, that very morning, a man with copper-colored hair and eyes blue as the sea stopped at a corner to read the headlines of the newspapers displayed there on the stand, and immediately the name Dietra shone out for him in rainbow lettering. It was his joy that made the lettering rainbow, of course, for it was just in printer's ink, for ordinary eyes. From that minute the copper-haired young man moved as in a cloud, for that young man was Hazar, the children's father. He had traced his wife and his children to this country directly after the war, and since then he had been wandering from city to city seeking them. But he thought little about the jobs, for his real work was his searching. His eyes were always searching among the crowds in all the poorer sections of the cities, and he would stand outside of stores and factories at the close of the working day, hoping that Dietra might come out of some dark door and see him waiting there. and then at noon hour he would wait in the same way at the door of school buildings. His blue eyes had grown haggard, watching at school doors for two little coppery heads. But now that was ended. He was a young god, striding away out of the city toward the road that led to the artist village. People who had never given him a glance before, in his shabby workman's clothes, and with his haggard, seeking eyes, now turned to stare after him as he passed. But though it would not have taken him long by train, it was long to walk, and Hazar was a day and a night in coming to the village. That day Nan had spent in making the little brown house spick and span from top to bottom, for although she had not yet told Dietra, she knew that her work here was finished. The mountains were calling her back. Kay and Gentian in school at their desks, and playing at recess time, and all the afternoon as they played with Rosemarie and in her grandfather's gardens, often lifted their heads to listen, for they thought they heard their father calling their names. When bedtime came again, Dietra and the children, and even Nan, slept but fitfully. They were so alive with their expectation. And all during breakfast the children talked of nothing but their father. "Will he come today? Do you think he might come today?" But Dietra, whose heart was beating even faster than her children, said, "No, no, hush, we must not expect him so soon. Why, he may be across the ocean, across the world from us." But in spite of those sensible words, at every step that came down the street, she turned her head to listen. Would it turn in at the little swinging gate? And the children listened with her. Dietra's employer had found someone at once to take Dietra's place, and so she was to be at home today, all day and every day. That was glorious for the children. But the glory faded, vanished for a little while, when Nan, after she had done the dishes and put the house in order, went up to her room and came down with her knotted purple bundle. Dietra looked at her in surprise. "Why, Nan, you are not going to go away from us, not now." Nan nodded. "There is nothing left here for me to do," she said. "I cannot stay where there is no work." Dietra got up from the bench under the window where she had been sitting arranging fresh tulips in her bowl. She looked at Nan earnestly and steadily. She did not say, "But there is work, Nan, the house to keep clean, meals to cook, dishes to wash. Please stay on to do these things for us." No, it did not enter Dietra's head to utter such foolishness, for Dietra now for the first time began to understand about Nan and what she might be. That had not been the work she had left her mountains to do. She had come to help Dietra toward happiness, and now Dietra was happy and all was well with her and the children. So Dietra said not a word, but stood looking at Nan steadily. But the children were dismayed. They cried, "Oh, please, please, Nan, don't go away and leave us. You must never do that." Nan turned to them, smiling. "Why, unless I go back to the mountains, then how can you come to visit me there? And that is what I want you to do, soon." Their hearts were eased. Dietra at last said, "Are you a good fairy, Nan? Is that what you are?" "No, I am not a fairy," but she answered gravely, as though in reply to a sensible question, as though she might very well have been a fairy, only it happened that she was not. "I am just a girl from the mountains." Dietra asked no more, and Nan moved toward the door. Kay and Gentian heard the music that she walked to then. There could be no doubt about it this time, though it was faint and far. Gentian ran after her. "Oh, may I have one last peep at the starry brightness?" she begged. Nan held the purple bundle to her. Gentian parted the sides a little and looked in. Yes, there was the blue, shining with its stars. Gentian bent above the purple bundle, looking into the sky. If she had not remembered her own bit of sky folded away upstairs in her drawer, she could never have done with looking now. When she lifted her face, her eyes had caught the reflection of the stars. Nan tied her bundle a little tighter then, so that no one, as she passed along the street, might catch a glimpse of the stars or suspect what wonderful thing was tied away there. Then she said goodbye. The children clung to her as far as the gate, and stood watching there while she went away down the street. But they could not be unhappy over her going, for this thing was true about Nan. No one could ever be unhappy because of her. But they stayed swinging on the gate, silent and thoughtful, after she had gone around the corner. A little way around the corner, as Nan walked to the sound of that music, faint and far, she met a young man. He was striding along with the morning sun in his eyes. His hair was a flame of copper. Nan could not help knowing at once that it was the children's father, Hazar, nearing the end of his search. She spoke to him, coming to a stand before him on the sidewalk, but his eyes were full of the morning sun, rather blinded, and to him it seemed that it was only a voice in the street, speaking to him out of the sunlight. He could never remember afterwards having seen Nan, but he remembered her words. "If you are looking for Ditra's little brown cottage, it is just around the corner, and Gentian and Kay are out in front, swinging on the gate." The young man did not even thank her, for, you see, he never realized until afterwards when the children told him so that a young girl must have given him the direction. He truly thought it was only a voice out of the sunshine, the morning sunshine that was full in his eyes, but he heard the words well enough, and suddenly he started running. He ran around the corner as fast as his long legs would take him, and the next minute both the children on the gate had uttered shrill glad cries that brought Ditra to the door. When she got there, she saw Hazar with Gentian and Kay tight in his arms as though he would never let them go. Then Ditra cried out too and ran down the walk, but Hazar was quicker than she. He let the children go and met her halfway from the door. The artist at that minute was coming through the hole in the hedge. He had had it made larger for his convenience the day before. He was coming for a morning call, but he stopped short when he saw Hazar and Ditra meeting, and the morning sunshine got into his eyes, or something did, for he saw no more but turned away and waited until later for his visit to the little brown house. That was a marvelous day for Kay and Gentian. They held to their father's hands, leaned against him whenever he stood still, and followed him like the shadows. Most of the morning they wandered over the meadows at the back of the house, while their father and mother talked about the young tree nurseries that he was to grow there. The children were so happy they were unusually quiet. As for Ditra, they looked at her wonderingly again and again, for she did not seem like their mother at all now. She was like a wide-eyed young girl listening to a fairy tale. They had all forgotten about school, of course, but no one ever blamed them for that. In the afternoon, Hazar and Ditra took a bench out under the cherry tree. The children sat at their feet in the grass. It was then that they noticed the policeman walking back and forth, pausing irresolutely each time as he reached the gate, almost as though he would put it open and come in. About the 20th time this happened, Hazar called to him, "Do you want anything, officer?" At that, the policeman took courage and did push the gate open. "It's welcome you are to this village," he said to Hazar, for he knew very well who he was, and he meant his welcome heartily. But then he turned to Ditra and asked in a hesitating voice, "Has your girl left you? I saw her on the street with a bundle this morning. She looked almost as if she was going away. She's gone back to the mountains, Dietra told him. The children saw how sorry the policeman was to hear this, and they felt sorry for him. Well, with a man in the house now and all, I suppose. The work might very well be too hard for a slip of a girl like that. They heard him mutter. No, indeed, Dietra answered, laughing. She had not noticed his sorriness. It was just because the work was too easy that she left us. She thought she could no longer find enough to do. She said so. The policeman shook his head. He could not understand that at all. He asked, "Then will you kindly let me have her address? I might be taking a trip to the mountains some day." Her address! Dietra and the children looked at one another in sudden bewilderment. How could they ever have neglected to ask Nan for that? Just Nan, the mountains. Was no address, Dietra had to admit. The policeman stared. "Don't you know at all where she's gone to?" he asked. "Only that she's gone back to the mountains." "Which mountains?" "Why, I see now that I don't know that. But I always supposed the Purple Mountains, the one we see off there, beyond the meadows and the wood." "Yes, that's what I thought too," the policeman muttered, "but that isn't enough to find her by, and there was something quite particular I had to say to her." Gentian suddenly stood up and took the man's hand. Yes, Gentian took the policeman's hand, the big hand that had gripped Kay by the shoulder so recently. She said softly but surely, her blue eyes looking confidently up into his, "She promised that Kay and I were to go to the mountains soon to visit her. That means she will let us know where she lives when the time comes, and we can tell you." The policeman, in some strange, deep way, was comforted. It was as though Nan herself had reassured him through Gentian's voice, and so he turned back to his tramping of the peaceful village streets, with his puzzlements changed into thoughtfulness. When the policeman had gone, the artist came through the hole in the hedge. Then he and Hazar and Dietra put their heads together in a very grown-up way to make plans for the future of Dietra's art and Hazar's tree nurseries. The children lost interest at that, and they were glad to hear Rose-Marie calling them, although they had heard her before that afternoon without answering. She was playing with some of their schoolmates on the artist lawn. The lawn was a sea, and the sundial was a pirate ship. Rose-Marie was the captain. "Come along, Kay and Gentian," she called. "We're on the track of hidden treasure." So Kay left his father's side and ran away to be a pirate, but Gentian got no farther than the door. There she suddenly had no heart for play and sat down on the door stone. "Aren't you coming?" Kay called back to her in surprise from over the hedge. "By and by I'll come, perhaps not now." So the pirates went dashing off after hidden treasure without her. Now she could think the thought that had been knocking at the door of her mind through the day, under all the happiness of her father's return. It isn't fair that the Wind Boy should stay away so. I wouldn't give him up for Kay and all the others, but he gave me up the minute he got his clear comrades back again." After a time, the artist came out of the door to go home, but he stopped for a minute by Gentian to say, "Why aren't you off with Kay and Rose-Marie, little Wind Girl? Or are you waiting here for your Wind Boy?" "No, I'm not waiting for him," Gentian answered, looking up rather mournfully at the artist. "He doesn't come to play any more." The artist looked rueful. "Is that because I've taken him away for a while? But soon he will be back, you know, all done into bronze, life-sized, and out in the tulip garden. He will play with you then, won't he?" "No, I didn't mean the statue. I mean the real Wind Boy up in the clear village. The one Mother copied, it's him I've lost." "I'm sorry," the artist said to that, "but perhaps his wings will bring him back down to you yet. Who knows?" The artist was so fond of his little wind girl already that it troubled him to see her sad. When he had gone, Gentian suddenly thought, "Well, anyway, I have my starry brightness. I can run up and see that." And she did get up and go softly into the house. Through the open sitting-room door, she saw her mother and father sitting on the bench under the window. They were looking at each other, saying nothing but smiling. Gentian went past on tiptoe. "They are glad to be alone," she thought. When she got up to her mother's room and had opened her own bottom drawer, she knelt before it on the floor, looking deep, deep into the starry blue depths. And as she looked, her thoughts cleared. They cleared until they were crystal clear, and this is what came into their clearness. "How foolish I am! Of course the Wind Boy will come back. He is my comrade. He wouldn't forget me, just because he was happy. He would remember all the more. He would remember all the more." She was herself again. Light-heartedly, she closed the drawer and jumped up. "I'll just go and play pirates after all," she thought. "Perhaps while we're playing, the Wind Boy will come sometime anyway." But now that she was standing, she saw that she was through into the clear land. The light was not sunlight any more, but the crystal clear light of the higher village. And again she was alone in a room of the house belonging to the Twilight Girl. She looked toward the window. There were the cherry-tree boughs, in all in flower with pink and white blossoms, not the boughs of the cherry tree that stood at the door of the little brown house, but the boughs of the other cherry tree above it in the clear air. The cherry blossoms down there were still in bud, but these up here were full blown, and there, among the cherry blossoms, on a swaying bough, waited the Wind Boy. She knew he was waiting by the droop of his wings and the expression of his face, but it was not the Wind Boy as she had seen him first. Now the light across his brow was clear. He was wearing silver sandals like her own. He did not see her standing at the window. He was looking down through the blossoming branches, as though he expected her to come up that way. "Oh, Wind Boy," she called, "here I am. I have come." He stared up, looking about. Laughing, she jumped over the window-sill and went running to him through the blue air. The Wind Boy made room for her, balancing on the trembling bow. "It took you long enough," he said, holding her hands. "It's been 2 whole days." "Oh, but I was looking for you all the time down in our village. You see, I don't know how to get up here. My coming just has to happen. I can do nothing about it, but you could come down to me any time. And I did go down, of course, many, many times, but I couldn't get you to see me. Not see you. I was looking for you every minute, even today with Father there. Yes, you were looking for me, but were you believing in me?" "Believing in you, of course. Why, I've always known you were real, as real, no matter how much anyone calls you a dream." "Oh, that kind of real, yes, that is nothing. You couldn't help knowing that, could you? I mean, were you believing in the real myself, the comrading part of me?" Gentian dropped her head. "No, that is what I had stopped believing in," she owned. "I had stopped believing that you were my comrade. I thought you wanted only your clear children playmates now." The Wind Boy smiled. "Well, that tells us, then, why you had to come up here to find me. I could never have got to you there with such silly thoughts in your head. But you've come at last, and it's all right. We are comrades." "Where are the clear children?" Gentian asked then. "Why are you alone?" "I was only waiting for you. They are over in the wood by the spring, looking for flowers. We'll go find them. But you've never been to the spring, have you? There are little gray stones in the bottom. They are gray when you first look, but after a while Yes, I know. Then they are all color. Oh, you have been there. The wind boy sounded disappointed that he was not to be the first to show her. No, I do not think I was there, but I saw you there. You were with my mother. She was working on the statuette. All the time she was talking to you. She was trying to make you smile. Yes, she was telling me stories. You had told her, she said. But where were you? Why didn't we know you were near? I was only looking through the spring, the one below. Neither you nor mother could see me, nor hear me when I called, and I could not hear your words either, though I saw your lips moving. The wind boy shuddered. That must have been horrid, strange and horrid. Yes, it was. Well, it's nothing like that this time. You're here now, safe and sound, in the clear land. Azil will be waiting by the spring to see if you came. She thought you would surely find the way. Azil, oh, I'm glad. Come, let's go. Gentian and the wind boy ran away fleetly then, out paths of blue air, toward the clear springs and the clear woods, and the wind boy spread his wings so wide as they went that I lost sight of Gentian behind their purple.